All right, hey, what's up, guys? We have Jeremy back. He worked with the NSA, and he wants to go over some security tips, and also, how to like work in the like making for better working environments. So how's it going, Jeremy? How you
It's
doing today?
going well. Good morning.
Yeah, good to have you back. So if you want to really quickly go over, everybody, if everybody saw the last one or heard the last one, they'll know who you are. But if you want to quickly go over who you are again. It could be like a shortened version, and then what you want to go into today.
Roger that. So I am Jeremy Duffy. I worked with the National Security Agency for 16 years. My goal there was to make it as honest and reputable as I could, which I didn't really have a lot of power. What I felt was the most useful in my career was when I taught this thing called OPSEC or Operation Security. And that meant teaching military and government and contractors how to not give away critical information accidentally. For example, if a military person posts a photo on the internet with them standing in front of a munitions depot and that photo is geotagged, then anyone could target a missile at that location and blow up the munitions depot. It's just that simple. And what I want to do is I want to share some of those principles, those ideas, how to think about being secure in your real life, and I call that life sec, based on that OPSEC principle, because lots of people are accidentally giving away more information than they meant to. And the reason that's a problem is either they're already at risk because they're LGBTQ, or maybe they're not the same religion as their community, or who knows, or you could become a target because you said or did something that really ticked somebody off or got their attention. You can go viral in an instant. I have tons of examples of that. And the most famous example, and I'm not going to get too graphic because I don't want to run on anybody's triggers, but a very recent story about a Japanese pop idol who posted a photo online of herself, took a selfie, and one of her stalkers was able to identify the train station that she was at because of the reflection in her eye. And that gave him enough information to start figuring out where she lived and track her down.
And then what did he end up doing when he tracked her down?
He assaulted her, but she survived. That's the important thing. As far as I know, it wasn't too egregious, but I'll leave that for people who want to look up that story. Again, I don't want to run on anybody's triggers. Let's just say bad things are possible when people have more information about you than you want them to have, which
Yeah.
will lead into some of the things that we talked about previously before the recording started. So we can circle back to that a little later.
Yeah, and I would, like I was saying before, I would assume that I'm maybe naive, but I'm not too worried about what I say or what I do on here because I'm not a big influencer. Obviously, they could come after anybody. It's just kind of like a matter of chance, or like you said before, you could go viral. But I would imagine that like most of the what would be probably the scariest, I would almost think would be like the OnlyFans type
Yes.
girls because they
Yes.
have some probably like really like obsessed um fans or whatever, and a lot of those fans I think aren't, maybe are incels or whatever and aren't able to get girlfriends, so I think their way of kind of having a girlfriend is through OnlyFans or like chatting with someone like that. But
Right.
obviously it could happen to anybody, right?
Well, yeah. And the key is there are two reasons that you're going to be targeted. One, they have a very good reason to come after you, or two, you just make yourself look interesting. You encourage them to come after you. You're a target of opportunity. Somebody's really pissed off and they're looking for somebody to take it out on. Or here's a real simple unclassified example. Say you buy a big TV, right? So I can see the blur of a big TV behind you. So you bought a big TV. Where did you put the box? Did you put it out in front like a giant rob me billboard? So
No.
big advertisement for the thieves. I've just got a 48K OLED TV, blah blah blah, right? But most people would because they don't think about that. They never think about the information that they're broadcasting out and what damage that could do.
Yeah, so can you see anything like kind of like behind me that might be noticeable?
No, no,
No.
not in this case. I mean, you're fine. The thing is that people don't realize what's possible until they learn about these kinds of problems. For example, most people don't realize how easy it is to post your fingerprints on the internet. Now, what is somebody going to do with your fingerprints? I don't know. But what I could do is if you lock your phone, your computer with fingerprints, if you have doors that unlock with fingerprints, and you posted your fingerprints online and I know where you live, I can get into everything you have. Or I could frame you for crimes. Okay, yeah, that's a little movie plot, but it's possible because every time you point your camera at your hand and take a photo, that photo is so high resolution in most cases that people have a perfect clarity picture of your fingertips.
Yeah. And this is all in the book, right? This and also the how to work, or like the work environment.
No, the book is just about listening in the workplace. The stuff I'm talking about today is based on a new article series that I wrote on my website, and I plan to do a briefing and seminar talk about this. I may spin it out into a book later. I don't have enough content for that right now. So, right now, I'm just talking about here are some basic things that you can do to keep yourself safe and some stories and examples that you probably didn't know about that you probably should. For instance, are you familiar with the term reflecto porn?
I think you might have brought it up
I might
last
have.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just the idea that if you don't check your reflections, you might be giving away more than you intended. So lots of people who put stuff on Craigslist, if they take a picture of I'm selling this thing, but it's shiny and they're not really wearing a lot of clothes, they're posting themselves naked. It happens more than you'd think. And a really funny example of that, which wasn't pornographic, but there was a guy who was really happy about his wedding and he posted a selfie and said, "Can't wait to get married tomorrow." And he was wearing huge reflective sunglasses. And because of that, it was easy to see that he was holding the wheel of a car while holding the phone. So he was driving while while taking a photo of himself. So the police contacted him and said, "Hey, we didn't get an invite to the wedding, but we're happy to give you some present in the term of some points and some fines."
Oh, wow. They're actually able to literally give you like a ticket for not even being there, like just
He
based
posted
on,
the evidence. He posted the evidence himself.
wow.
I don't know if they ever actually followed through, but he sure drew that attention. And the funny thing is, since I knew about that story, I actually caught a guy on LinkedIn doing the same thing. He was posting a video, some sort of, motivational speech of whatever life lesson. And the whole time he had these huge sunglasses on, but the photo was flipped. So it looked like he was in the passenger seat. But in the reflection of the glasses, you could clearly see him holding the wheel. So I called him out on it and he ended up deleting that post.
Yeah. I don't know if you know, do you know who Nick Fuentes is?
I don't think so.
He's like this alt right, like he's kind of like a smaller alt right guy. But recently, I actually kind of like did like a little YouTube video on it, and it's like surprisingly, it wasn't a bigger deal than it was. But someone just showed up to his house, and a lot of people don't like this guy for good reasons. Like I said, he's like an alt right, like pretty much Nazi,
I think I know who
and
you're talking about. Yeah, go ahead.
yes, he kind of looks like a nerd or something, but
Yeah.
like
Didn't he move in with his mom because he got scared because of the things he posted online?
yeah, well, I think I don't know if he was with his mom at this point, but somebody showed up to wherever he was living, which
Yeah.
may have been his mom's house, and you could fully see he had like a gun and like a crossbow or whatever,
Mm,
and was knocking on the door. And if Nick Fuentes had opened, I'm assuming he would have just killed him. But I think he had killed three other people like earlier in the day or
that's
something. So
crazy, right?
this guy was just going around like killing people, and he was like, I guess I'll just show up to Nick Fuentes' house and kill him. And then the cops, I think, caught him, got into like a shootout with him. I mean, it was a really crazy story. Um, but like for some reason, like not a whole lot of people were talking about it. And so, I mean, that just kind of goes to show if yeah, you really don't want people.
You don't want people showing up at your house.
No.
As an example, I work with a girl at the bank whose husband works in repossession. And one of the people who had their car repossessed showed up at their house angry, really freaked her out. And I said, how did he find out where you lived? She said, we don't even know. And I said, okay, well, what does your husband put on the reports when he files with the police, when he files for the repossession? Does he put your home address or a business address? And she said, oh, that might be it. And I said, okay, yeah, so you need to think about these things. When you put out information, who has it? Who has access to it? Where can it go from there?
Yeah. And me trying, I don't know, I'm not doing as much as I used to do, but me trying to make it on YouTube or whatever, like I film a lot. I usually don't film myself in the video, which I think is probably like a good, maybe a good thing, but like I'll be filming, like if I go like to the beach or whatever, I'll film the beach or, whatever, the woods. But I obviously do have to be careful doing that because people, if they, I mean, I wouldn't imagine anybody really wants to try and track me down, but you never know, I guess, right? I mean, and it is
Well,
probably better that I'm not really in the video, I'm assuming, right? Or does it really matter?
okay, so let me be super clear that both OPSEC and LifeSec, they're principles to learn about the risks and what's possible so you can make smart risk decisions. It's not about me telling you what you can or cannot do. It's not about being afraid and like just staying under a rock. It's just you don't give away information that you didn't mean to. That's really all this is about, right? So, for example, if I didn't have this fake background here and I was this there's I'm still trying to figure out where I saw this story because I want to use it as an example in my article. But some grandma who lived in India of this student was on a voice chat with her son or grandson, and his roommates saw her with a giant Nazi symbol on the wall and kind of freaked out because they don't know that the swastika is not a Nazi symbol. The reverse swastika is. A swastika is a Buddhist symbol. You see it on the map. If you go to Google Maps and look up Japan right now, there are swastikas everywhere because they have Buddhist temples everywhere. But that's hard to explain. So maybe if you're going to be on a Zoom call with somebody, you make sure you don't have something like that in the background because you don't want to have that conversation. That's what I mean by risk management.
Yeah. And in terms of who are you more worried about seeing this type of stuff? Kind of like random people, or maybe your family or whoever, or like the government, like the NSA. Like, do you think the government
I don't
gets
think
involved?
I don't think the government cares or is watching you unless you're attached to some known criminal element. The odds of you being targeted are not good. Uh, of course, that's changing because the current administration is basically going after whoever irritates them. So, in my case, considering what I talk about, I have to be very careful not to draw their attention, right? Because you can become a target very easily by what you say or what you do or what people think you say or did. There are people who have drawn a lot of attention to themselves for accidental or careless reasons. For example, there was a city administrator who, in a meeting or in a post, I don't remember the particulars, you can look this up, but he used a word that means stingy that sounds a lot like the N word. It's not, but it sounds a lot like it. So people thought that that's what he was referring to. But who wants to have that conversation? It doesn't matter at all that he was right as far as a dictionary is concerned. People thought he used a racial slur, and it created a world of problem for him. He got fired. It was just bad news for him. So you want to avoid those kinds of things. And the best way to do that is with some awareness. You have to know that that's a problem or that this is possible or things can go out of hand really, really fast.
Yeah. And what was the word that, I mean, obviously you don't want to say it, but
I'll spell it Niggardly.
oh, I feel like I've heard that. Yeah. Which actually that actually means stingy, but
Stingy. It's
it,
stingy and miserly and has no relation whatsoever to anything that could be considered racist at all.
yeah. I feel like I have heard that word before, and people obviously assume that it is racist. What do you think about the stuff on like a lot of people with the cancel culture or whatever were getting in trouble, and me too, were getting in trouble for stuff they posted on Twitter or wherever else, like 5 or 10 years ago. Do you think this kind of applies also to that? Like, you don't want to get
You
in
know that
trouble with your workplace for.
it's an interesting question, right? Because the way I okay, so when you're actually looking at risk management, one of the things you look at is history. So history, doctrine, capability, these are all factors of risk, whether somebody is an actual threat to you. So history is actually important. So and for those of you who are concerned that I'm saying I support or don't support this, let me finish. The idea is that you don't ignore history, but you don't let it rule you either. So should people have to answer for things they tweeted? I think so. I have daughters, and if I dig up information on somebody that they're interested in and they're posting a bunch of Nazi stuff or whatever, I'm going to want some answers. So either that's, oh, that was for a play. We were doing Sound of Music and I was playing this part. Look, here are all the props. Here's all the information. Okay, cool. We're good now. Or, you know what? I got looped in. I cannot believe I ever felt that way. I am so ashamed of that. And, I have already apologized to everyone that I hurt, uh, and done every restitution I can, but that is not who I am. A proper apology. But yeah, people should answer for stuff like that because it puts serious doubt on their character. And I think that's worth addressing. But that doesn't mean that if they do apologize properly and in a way that feels and is actually meaningful, that we can't forgive them, although that is up to every individual. But I think it's very clear that some cases of canceling are entirely appropriate and some aren't. It really just depends on the circumstances. But people who expect you to move on when they haven't even apologized or made things right can go F themselves, because that is just an abuser taking advantage of counter cancel culture, victim complex.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the main thing is with, like, I think that you're right. Everybody deserves a chance to defend themselves, and if someone did something 5 or 10 years ago, and depending on, like, I guess, like what it is, but then you should be able, if you go to a new job or whatever, you should be able to defend yourself. But the only problem with that is, I guess, some people could just lie their way out of it. You know what I mean? Some people are
Yeah, I
probably
do.
good at, like, coming up with some sort of excuse, like, oh, and some people will just deny it completely, like Kevin Spacey or whatever will just say, oh, it just never happened. And then you're kind of in a situation where, like, you really don't know, like, it probably did happen, whatever the
It's it's
allegation is.
difficult, right?
Yeah.
So the key is in our positions as armchair warriors, we have a lot more leeway in how we respond to that. If you're somebody who's in an HR office or a news organization or a university, and you have to make a decision about whether or not to expel somebody, that's a lot harder call, because whatever decision you make, you're also going to have to justify publicly, especially if people are pissed off. Now, in my opinion, a principled organization will make a decision that is unpopular for the right reasons and defend it. Because I've seen corporations bend to the loud voices of a minority, and in doing so have harmed representation and uh, uh, set us back. Essentially, they're cowards. It was cowardly, and I don't respect that.
Yeah.
And this comes down to specific situations.
Yeah. So is there anything else in terms of just being aware on, I mean, it sounds like that's just kind of like the main thing is be aware of what's behind you, be aware. I mean, you may want to, I guess it almost sounds like you may kind of want to post less, maybe. I don't know, you know what I mean?
Well, I think it's okay to post. The key is you have to understand what you're giving away. So let's talk about photos, for example, because that's a real easy and honestly more fun topic when it comes to this kind of stuff. So there's reflections you have to watch for. There's background. So things in the background that could be a problem. Can you see street signs? You know that if you are take a photo of yourself outside and there's enough detail around you, there's AI tools that can get a pretty good idea of where you live based on that, at least the area, which can narrow things down in a hurry. And that combined with a post where you talked about, oh, the game last night sucked, this team lost, really starts to narrow it down, right? So in combination, or the fact that if there are documents out that people can see, you have a blurred background, not everybody does, right? And this is just the video. What if you take a photo, like check out my new key holder? And on the table are medical documents with your name and some other private information, birthday, blood type, who knows. And the keys themselves, you can replicate a key if you can see the ridges of the key, because those ridges are not analog, they're digital. They're just numbers like 1 through 5. So I can see them and I can tell what the number is, go to the locksmith and say, hey, lost my key, but this is the pattern for it, and have a key made. So in the case of Adam Savage, he's the guy from Mythbusters. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I've heard of
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So he posted a photo of his car in front of his house, but it was geotagged. So it put a pin on the map right to his place. So if he had also taken a picture of his key holder, I would have known where he lived and had a key to his front door, just like that. And you don't have to be smart, rich, or in any way capable. You just have to be close by.
Yeah, I mean, like we were saying, I don't know. It's just like we were saying, I kind of feel like this is probably more for somewhat famous people. I mean, if you're famous, like at all, really, like if even if you have
Famous
some
or a woman. So
or a woman.
you've got a fiance, right?
Yeah,
You should ask her about this. Women have to think constantly about assault. It's something a lot of men don't realize, because
yeah,
if things go bad, it goes bad fast. All it takes is one guy with a bad idea and the opportunity. So it can be a real problem. On LinkedIn, there are constant posts about women who posted something, and because they have a nice looking photo, they get all these creepy direct messages in their inbox. It's crazy how much people come after them. And as a guy, we're just completely oblivious to this most of the time. So a woman at LGBTQ, just existing right now is dangerous for them. Anybody who's Hispanic right now, there's this essential witch hunt throughout the country for people who are Hispanic, because they're assumed to not be legal because they're Hispanic or just brown. If they could be Hindu, they could be, from anywhere, Middle East, whatever. And they'll have ICE coming after them. So a lot of people have a lot of reasons to keep their profile a little more minimized. And I was going to say that the answer to the photo thing is just post smaller photos. Almost every risk I talked about is depending on you posting a very large photo where I can see the details clearly in the background. So
by large, you mean like because I mean
10,
most of
20 megapixels, that kind
oh,
of.
you mean you actually kind of would rather use less megapixels, not so much like how big the actual picture is, because obviously most people are just looking at it on their phone. But like the more megapixels, the more you can kind of zoom
Zoom
in.
in, exactly. For
Yeah,
example, when I want to find somebody's fingerprints for one of these briefings, it's really easy. I just look up the term in my hand and then go to Google, and the settings, you can choose photos by size, and I look for everything that's 20 megapixels or larger. And then I get people that show, here's a bug in my hand, here's a coin in my hand, here's a locket or whatever, and boom, fingerprints.
yeah. And now with like the new iPhones, they have like 48 megapixels or whatever. I remember
Yeah, yeah, it's
before they
pretty
had like
crazy.
12, but I mean that's gonna keep getting crazier and crazier. In terms of the LGBTQ and Mexicans, how do you think that's gonna play out? Like, I'm not even really sure with the LGBTQ. They're kind of going after them. Well, I guess they just don't really. Trump made it so like you have to be one of two genders, right? Basically that, and then like you can't
Right. And they're
like
getting rid of unisex bathrooms and basically doing everything they can to make the world more hostile for people who are not cis white, essentially.
yeah. And I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's they're necessarily going to be in a place of danger or anything. Maybe they will, but because I mean, more people are coming out against them. But
I think what's happening is that Trump has always normalized violence and acting on your worst impulses. And I think what's happening now is just an acceleration of that. So I think that a lot of people I know who are LGBTQ are afraid, and they have good reason to be. And I think that it's vitally important that these people understand that when they're posting online, they could draw the wrong kinds of attention or give away more than they intended, not just through their photos, but what they post. For example, I had to teach commanders of air bases to stop posting articles about themselves that talk about their wife and their kids, their names, their ages, the schools that they go to. I had a guy that I worked with who proved that point by figuring out where his daughter went to school, what college she went to, and her class schedule. And then he sat on a bench and took a picture with her and then gave it to the commander and said, "That's how easy it would be to go after your daughter," which was a really risky thing for him to do because the commander might not have liked that. But that actually worked out well in the end. He was able to convince him that, yeah, this stuff matters.
Yeah. How bad do you think it's going to get for the LGBTQ or the Mexicans? I mean, it's kind of like I don't know, like with a lot of this type of stuff, and obviously this seems to be a little bit more severe than before now. It seems like Trump's gotten more and more severe with it, but it seems kind of like they'll say they're going to do stuff, then like a year or two or three, 4 years go by, and then it's kind of like nothing really changed. You know what I
Well,
mean?
people
So
are
it's like
getting rounded up and sent to Guantanamo now. We have a concentration camp in Guantanamo Bay right now, and
it's a
people are being sent to
literal
it.
it's a literal concentration camp in
Well, if
Guantanamo.
you're rounding up people and throwing them into a prison-like situation, yeah, I don't know what else you would call that. I think that meets the definition exactly.
Oh, so it doesn't necessarily have to be like it's not necessarily like killing the people, it's just throwing them into
Correct.
a camp. Yeah.
No, yeah, it's the concentration makes it a concentration camp.
Yeah.
So the Japanese concentration camps in World War II, the one that George Takei talks about quite a lot, because when he was a kid, his family was rounded up and put into camps.
Is he the guy from
Star Trek.
Star Trek? Yeah, and he's been on like the Howard Stern show and stuff, I think.
Yeah, he's a famous advocate. He's also married to a guy. He's LGBTQ. So he's on the forefront of a lot of these battles. So he's been in concentration camps in America, and he's been targeted because of his sexual orientation. And yeah, he's a good
And
guy to follow if you want to learn about that kind of stuff.
he which concentration camp was he in?
The Japanese internment camps in World War II.
Okay, so was that over here or was that
That was
back
in
in?
America.
Yeah, in America.
They
Yeah,
started rounding up Japanese Americans, people who had lived here maybe for generations even, and just took them out of their homes, took them out of their businesses, and put them in camps.
and that wasn't even like that long ago. And that was like the what was that? The
The 40s.
'60s, the '40s. Still, I mean, not that long ago to be doing that, but I guess here we are. So we're literally at this point sending the any illegal immigrant, right, to Guantanamo Bay. It's not only the Mexicans; it's any
I don't
illegal
have the
immigrant.
exact details, just that it is happening now. I mean, you might have heard that there are Hispanic people that are afraid to go to work because they might get deported, and that there are at least some people who have claimed that the immigration services have taken their parents, their friends who are American citizens.
It's kind of crazy because we're living in, like, me and you, white, American males are living in a situation where we're not worried at all. But meanwhile, bad shit really is happening to people. It's like, even in our own country, it's happening, and like we're not really, or at least I'm not even like really that aware of it. Like I hear that they are doing it, but I'm like, don't really actually realize that they're actually sending them to Guantanamo Bay as we speak.
Yeah,
And so, I
you
mean,
have to
why Guantanamo Bay? Why not just send them back to like where they came from or whatever? It seems like Guantanamo Bay is like kind of extreme.
Well, did you hear that they tried to send some people to Mexico and they wouldn't let the plane land?
No.
Yeah, that was in the news recently. So
How?
there
What do
are
you mean
places.
they? What do you mean they wouldn't let the plane land?
Mexico refused to let the plane
Oh,
land. They said, "No, you can't land here. Turn back."
oh, wow. So they literally were like, yeah, they were literally like, it's kind of like either we don't want them back or you can't give them back.
Well, maybe. I mean, how does Mexico know that they're Mexican citizens or that they
Oh,
belong
yeah.
there? I mean, we're just forcing refugees on people essentially. And why would the company go along with, or why would the country go along with that? They have no reason to do that. This has become a problem. There was another country that was saying they wouldn't take any of those refugees back, and then they changed their mind, and because of the threat of tariffs, or I don't even know. But the thing is that this is the reality for a lot of Americans, and it is hard for your standard, white cis people to care if they're not really paying attention until somebody they know and care about happens to them, right? I have LGBTQ friends, family, acquaintances. I have Hispanic and foreign friends, family, and acquaintances, more or less. And, I'm worried for them, right? I don't have to be personally at risk. Now, I am at risk just for different reasons, mostly because I'm speaking out and Trump is very anti whistleblower. But I wasn't related to the White House. I was related to the NSA. So maybe he doesn't care. But the thing is that it's just so important that you're careful with your information so you don't make yourself an easy target if somebody decides to come after you.
So for those people, obviously the best thing to do would just be to like lay low. I mean, do you have any advice for those types of people?
Well, yeah, I mean, lay low is a good strategy. But if you are going to speak out, and it is a noble thing to do, because the less people who speak out, the more normalized this all becomes. Just like in Nazi Germany, the neighbors said nothing, that kind of thing. That's a problem. So if you do want to speak out, make sure you're not giving away information in the background, that you don't say too much. For instance, I said I have LGBTQ loved ones. I didn't tell you who. A lot of people would just go right to, oh, yeah, my brother is this, or my sister is that, or my kid is that. You don't want to do that because now you're outing them. And maybe they didn't want that, especially on a podcast or if I go on TV or whatever. And now painted a target right on them. And that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. Like just in general, you kind of want to watch out for what you say. And like when I first started doing this, and even now, like my podcast isn't big enough to where I'm too worried about it. I pretty much just say whatever I want. But I remember I had some like friends in the beginning who I wanted to come on, but like they didn't want to come on because they were afraid of this type of thing. Honestly, like either get mainly with their work, not really with the government or anything, but like with their work. Like if their work happened to see it and then they fire them.
Right.
And luckily, I have a job where like I'm not really like worried about that. And also, like I don't know, I kind of just feel like I'm gonna say what I want to say, and I don't really feel like anything that I'm saying is that bad. So you know what I mean? Like I don't know. That's me. But I mean, obviously, according to what you're saying, you kind of always want to be on guard. You don't want to say too much. You don't really you obviously don't want to show too much.
Well, let me give you a specific example, right? So think of this like, if you take kung fu for the rest of your life, you will move a certain way because it's better for balance and it's safer for you. And not just because you're going to get attacked, but because then you don't trip and fall, you don't put yourself in precarious situations. This is a similar idea. You adopt these principles. So one of the most important life sec principles is speak generally. Because first of all, most people aren't interested in the nitty gritty details of your life. You're actually a very boring conversationalist when you go into all this detail about, oh, I used to live in Alabama and back in the 70s. Oh, wait, I think it was the 80s because I had this dog and I'm bored already. People are leaping out of windows to avoid you. But that's also a security principle. Don't say, I don't mention my wife by name on anything I've ever written. I only say my wife because I have a reason that I want people to know I'm married and I have a wife. Okay. So, but if I didn't, I would say my spouse. If it wasn't important to say wife, I'd say spouse. Or I might say I'm married and just leave it at that. Never be more specific than you have to and adopt that as a life philosophy. And you will be not only a better conversationalist, but safer too, because you don't need to say all this extra information. And a really good example of that is you're traveling. Let's say you're in Europe and somebody says, where are you from? Well, what would you say? Would you say the city that you live in, the neighborhood? Of course not, because they wouldn't know it anyway. You just say America. That's as close as you need to be, unless they ask follow-up questions. If you're out of state, I live in Washington, and maybe I'm visiting Texas. Somebody says, oh, where are you from? I say Washington, because it's good enough. If they're curious, I can say, oh, yeah, Seattle area, and that is as close as I will ever get, except for people who literally live in the area near me. I might say the neighborhood I live in, but the rest of the time, no way, because it's not necessary. Only give the minimum necessary and always ask if it's necessary. If you go to the dentist and they ask you for your social security number, you should ask them, why? Why would I give that to you? And they'll say, oh, it's for insurance reasons. Well, I called my insurance and they said we don't use that as an identifier. Nobody needs it. And I tell the dentist, no, you can't have that information because that creates risk. The more people who have that information, the more risk I'm at. And that's the most important thing. The more you can deny information in location and specificity, the safer you are just in general. Because you talked many times about how you don't really think you're saying anything wrong. Well, if I remix everything you said and everything you posted and put it together in the right way, I can make it look like you did. And the key is the more information I have about you, the easier it is to destroy you. Okay. Because I've had people use information against me that was either falsified, wrong, or just grossly exaggerated or out of context. That's how they got rid of my security clearance. Total fabrication.
Yeah, I think we talked about before about the workplace where you kind of have to be wary of everybody because you never know who's out to get you. And I've had people who seem to be out to get me for whatever reason. And you, especially in the workplace, I think you really have to kind of like watch your back because, they'll fire you for anything. You know what I
Or if
mean?
coworkers are obsessed with you because they think that you stole their lunch and they're freaked out, they're just going on the rampage. Well, they can look up your phone number. They might be able to find your home address. Uh, the possibilities are endless. But I'll give you a good general example. So, Elon Musk, he threw what certainly looked to me like a Nazi salute, but apparently he's suing people who say that publicly or post it. So
Is she?
just by calling it as you see it, you could end up on the crosshairs of a man who has more than enough money to bully you into silence, no matter how right you are.
He's really doing that. He's suing people now for just saying that.
Well, that's the story. Yeah, I don't know if he's actually done it or not, but I can't see what would stop him. He's got money. He's got lawyers.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, exactly. It's like you're not gonna win going against somebody like Elon Musk who
Right.
has unlimited money.
And the thing is, it's trivially easy to scan a social media platform for the words Nazi salute Elon Musk and then target those people, especially if they gave away their real name in their profile or posted enough information that makes it clear. Because, I mean, just think about all the posts you've ever made and all the searches you ever made. And if I had that information, what would I learn? Or what could I make it look like I learned?
Yeah. So in terms of another thing that people think about too is like Google, um, I just say Google, but really
Searches,
search, yeah,
engines,
any
whatever.
search,
Yeah.
which search or even LLM. I was gonna say ChatGPT, but LLM or search. I know some people like to use like I've heard like I think DuckDuckGo or something is supposed to be safe, but do you use the normal Google or like do you have like your own search engine that you use to make sure it's private?
Using the Brave browser and search engine as my primary. I use DuckDuckGo as a backup depending on what I need because Brave is still working itself out. And I still go to Google sometimes, but I try to stay off it and I never use it in Chrome or logged in.
Okay. Um, yeah, I've actually checked out Brave recently just because somebody was saying how you can like watch YouTube videos on there like without the ads, I think it's like
Mm-hmm.
a ad-free thing. And then also what about like talking or even texting, I guess. I know a lot of people use like stuff like Signal or
Mm-hmm.
Telegram or Discord. Do you use those or what do you use for that?
Well, not until recently. I actually had not heard of Signal until very recently because it wasn't relevant to what I was doing. But there were some people from ProPublica. I don't know if you're familiar with them. It's
I've heard of that, but
Yeah,
I don't
they're
know
the
what it
people who
is.
broke the story of the corrupt Supreme Court justices, that kind of thing. So independent
Yeah.
news. And one of the guys there reached out to me to talk about my book and the content there, particularly in terms of whistleblower protections, because that's so important to keeping things in balanced and checked. And whether or not I thought that that was going to get worse, and of course it was, but also it wasn't good to start with. That was the key thing. But he was the one who introduced me to Signal. And I would say that if somebody in his position is recommending it, that's probably a good thing because they have to protect their sources.
Yeah. The only reason really why I've heard of Signal is because the owner of the company went on Joe Rogan, and I don't know, he seemed like an all right guy, but since that interview, I don't think that I've ever heard of anybody really using Signal. I think it's supposed to be like the best what do you call it? The best
Secure messaging.
yeah, exactly. But like but normally I'll get like Telegram or Discord or even like I guess like WhatsApp or I mean there's a and so now I have like a bunch of these different like messengers that like different people will be using. And in my mind it's kind of like come on, like isn't I know with some things it's not, but like I would kind of like assume iPhone or Apple would be safe enough just because they kind of pride themselves on the whole security thing.
All I
I don't
can
know.
think of is when Apple lost access to all of the photos that people had taken. The Apple Photos system got completely opened up, and
Did
people,
that happen? I
yeah,
I don't even
yeah,
remember.
it was a big deal because lots of people had taken nude selfies and sent their spouses nudes, etc., and those were all released publicly.
Oh man, like somebody obviously somebody hacked in or whatever and got it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I think that I'm obviously probably too naive, but when it comes down to like safety and security, I'm like, well, I trust Apple and I trust Google, and I don't think that Google or Apple is going to intentionally, and I really kind of don't think that they're going to intentionally do anything. I don't think that anything is intentional by them. I think it's all probably just maybe getting hacked by somebody else. But
That depends because you have to understand that they do use the information they know about you to target advertising, to build profiles on you, to figure out better ways to sell to you, and they sell that information uh, to the best of my knowledge, but or at least share it. And the fact that it exists creates a target for people. So it's generally best to avoid letting those companies have your data. For example, I won't use a Microsoft computer with a Microsoft account because they've not shown themselves to be trustworthy or honest about how they use that information.
do you feel like Microsoft is worse than those other two, Apple and
No,
Google?
no. On the
No,
spectrum, I'd say Google is the worst by far.
I think they do sell or share it, like you said, because now Apple has that thing where it's like, do you want, like, can we like use your data or whatever? And you can
Yeah.
say no. And then obviously, I think Facebook supposedly might be
Facebook is
known
bad.
as the worst, right? I
Facebook is
mean,
very, very bad.
I know they were getting like a bunch of trouble for that. I feel like Google, for whatever reason, manages to kind of not get in, as much trouble as
It's
Facebook.
it's not as reported on or obvious, or maybe they're not having as many breaches or incidents. I'm not really sure. I just know that Google has a variety of ways to track you, everything down to what buttons you click, what you look at, what you don't, and everywhere you go. It's not good because these giant profiles on you can be used, like I said, for lots of things, advertising or worse.
Yeah. I think like I don't know. I think the main thing with me is that like I don't know if I brought this up last time, but and I don't really want to be um like I'm not like necessarily trying to say you're wrong or anything, but like with me, it's like I kind of feel like I'm not really for the most part doing anything wrong
No,
on
no.
there, and I even if they do take my information, because obviously there are some people out there who I really do think need to be careful about being targeted, and it could even happen to me. But for the most part, I'm not using a whole lot of. I'm not. I don't really care too much if they're using my information, even for marketing. Mainly just for the fact that the marketing like rarely, if ever, like works on me.
Yeah.
I understand that like the idea of it is still bad. Like you still don't really necessarily want them to have your data or take your data. But
Back to those security principles I was talking about, it's not necessarily that they will do something. I mean, there are lots of examples of that, and it's easy to say, well, that won't happen to me, and maybe you're right. But the one thing that we're sure of is if they don't have the information, they can't abuse the information. So it's best to, within reason, I mean, you're not going to go kill yourself. I actually have an Amazon Echo in my house. It's convenient, but I am careful what I say about what I say near it. And I unplug the one upstairs when I don't want it, listening to me when I'm in certain meetings or whatever. But
Do you always have it on, the one downstairs?
yeah, yeah, but that's in an open area, so we know it's there, and we keep in mind that we shouldn't be saying really sensitive things around it. But the key is that you want to deny that information as much as possible, because the abuse is just limited to whether or not that company is using it appropriately. For example, there are lots of cases where company employees took data from the records to engage in identity theft or stalking or what have you.
So yeah, a lot of times it's not even the company as a whole. It's just like individual people working there who, especially obviously, like if you have some, I don't even know if I don't even think those have like cameras, right? But obviously you wouldn't really want like a well, I mean, I know you can put like safety or security cameras in your house, but obviously you wouldn't want that because you could have some guy in there who's,
Some creep. Yeah.
some creep who's watching you, you know what I mean, in one of those ADT like security systems. You never know,
Right.
right? But I
That's
mean, as
why
far
I prefer to have offline security. So, yeah, I want all the cameras, but I want them to be only in my house, on my network, and nowhere else.
yeah,
No
exactly.
intermediary, no third party.
Yeah, if you have the cameras, yeah, don't have them so anybody go watch them.
And
And then I've
again,
also,
that's your call, right? Because it's about making a risk decision. Okay. What is important to you? How hard is it to be secure? If it's easy, then do it. You don't have to give your phone number to the store when they ask you for your club number. You can use the Jenny number, 8675309. It works everywhere, and you'll
yeah,
still get the discounts. Stuff like that.
yeah. I never even thought about that. Does that actually work using like the wrong number? You can still like get the
I've never
discounts.
had it not work ever.
Oh
In
wow.
in any store I've gone to, you just pick the area code that you're currently in and then type the Jenny number, from the old 80s song.
Yeah. I wonder if somebody else actually has that number and is like
They,
getting
they do.
they're getting like they're getting like a bunch of um
Oh, I see what you mean.
like text messages or whatever. Although they don't really text them, but yeah.
I would hope the companies don't do that, because I'm betting that that's enough of a problem that they know better, but who can say? But in either
Yeah.
case, the point is that
Yeah.
you just think about the information you might be giving away and whether or not you can avoid that. For example, websites ask for your birthday all the time. Why would you ever put your real birthday? What's the point in that? All they want to know is that you're older than, X, like older than 13, so that they can open the account for you. Then put in any date that's older than that. You're not, within reason. I don't know if that's illegal or not. And I'll just say that I allegedly do that. But I mean, what reason would you put your real information in when it doesn't need to be?
Yeah. And yeah, and any place that like over, I don't know, it bothers me when you go into like a CVS and they're like you have to put your number in every time. It's just kind of like I don't really want to like use my number. I don't want to use my email. Like what, whenever they're asking for stuff like that, Social Security, they ask, a bunch of questions. It's like I don't want to give you any of that. It's just kind of like annoying that they even do that. Like I almost
Yeah.
feel like they almost like shouldn't do it. Like I'm not like I'm like I said, I'm not too worried about CVS having like my phone number, but it's just kind of like annoying. I don't really want everybody to have my phone number. I'm
Well,
getting so many, mainly just for like spam. I'm getting so many emails that it's hard to
invasion,
keep up.
right? Like if I asked you for your phone number, okay, we're not at that level, right? We're having a good time, we communicate by email, that's good enough. Why should you have my phone number? Why should I have yours? And if I asked, it would be kind of rude and invasive. And the CVS, all that crap, that's become normalized, but it's the same thing. It's invasive. What do you mean? Why do you want my phone number? That's the question I ask. And they say, well, we just use it to track this. Oh, then you need a phone number. It doesn't have to be mine. So
Yeah. And um yeah, yeah, yeah. What was I gonna say? Yeah. So Yeah, like there. Well, yeah. What I was gonna say was, I think that like with me, like because I'm such a trusting person, like when I first started doing these podcasts, I literally just asked like one of the first guys, for his number, which is rude. You know what I mean?
It
But I
can
really
be. It
wasn't.
just depends.
It depends, and it's like I kind of felt comfortable with this guy. I can kind of we were talking, and I can tell, and then he must have felt comfortable with me because he gave me his number. But then I had one guy. It was through Reddit, and I was like, but it was through like a different subreddit. I was talking to him for a while actually about like drones and stuff, like flying drones. And I wanted him to come on, and then I said, what's your number? And he got mad. He was like, why do you want my number? Like that's kind of like fucked up. Like kind of like no, like I'm not. And that was it. Like that just ended it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you got to be careful of that. But I also wanted to bring up too. But I also feel like it should get to a point where like I feel comfortable enough with you, and like I'm not going to ask for your number, but like I have had a guy on multiple times, and I just like recently asked for his number because we might start doing like a regular thing. And he hasn't responded yet, but I'm like, I don't know, maybe that was a bad idea to ask for the number, but like at some point I don't really want to be keep talking via Reddit. Like at some point give me like even if it's like a Telegram number or whatever.
Yeah.
But to your point, well, kind of to your point too, somewhat recently, like I said, I'm a pretty open guy, and somewhat recently I went to like a poker table, and I'm trying to be friendly, I'm trying to be conversational, and there was a guy there from I probably shouldn't even say what school it doesn't even matter, but
There you
was
go. See,
yeah, he
getting
was
it.
from some college around here, and they came out, and then he stopped to play poker. They were going to Palm Springs, and I was just talking to him, and I was like having a casual conversation, and I was, oh yeah, where are you guys like staying at? Not because I am a creep or anything, just because I was like, oh, like some people ask, where do you live or where are you staying at? And I could tell he kind of got uncomfortable just by me asking, I think.
Well, poker game. Maybe you come find him later to get your winnings back. I
No,
don't know.
yeah, exactly. And then I kind of was like, maybe that was a bad idea. So at that point,
Well,
I kind of just,
maybe it's how you word it. Like, did you find a good place to stay? It's a very different question.
yeah,
Or you say, hey, if it might be quicker to communicate by phone. This is my number if you want it, and then just see if they reciprocate or not.
yeah,
And if they don't, well, then they're not comfortable. But if they do, then it's cool, right? So you have to be very careful. The most important thing is to understand that as a very outgoing person, which I am also, you have to understand that this is a private thing, and definitely more so for some people than others, especially when they're at risk, especially if they've been burned before, or just especially if they're afraid and they understand that this information can spread easily and who knows what people are going to use it for. Case in point, so Elon Musk has started getting into government systems and getting into databases of huge amounts of information about government employees, their social securities, their address history, their names, their relations, their security backgrounds, everything that the government has on those employees, apparently Elon Musk has now for some reason. And that's really threatening. And people will try to wave it away like, oh, what's Elon going to do with it? It doesn't matter. It's what he can do with it, or if he's just careless with it. Just yesterday, there was an article about the fact that this Doge website wasn't even secured. People could log into it and actually get into the source code and the database for it because they didn't secure it properly. And so he could just be incompetent with your data, and that's enough, let alone figure out targets to go after of people who piss him off or are inconvenient for him.
yeah, yeah. I just saw that with his website. Like, so were people just going on there and kind of like spamming it, or what happened with
No
that?
source code that ran the website, and they were able to push updates to it. So essentially, to overwrite the source code for the website, if I understand correctly, which means they could upload code that gave them full remote control, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And then a while back, like I don't, that's the thing is like some of the stuff I don't even know if I should bring it up, but it's not that big of a deal. But a while back, my friend was making comedy videos, and I was in them, and then my fiance was in one of them, and like as like an actor or whatever in the comedy video on Instagram or whatever, and somebody like commented like who's the
Who's the
girl
babe?
in it? Yeah, and it's like
See, creeps, they come.
No, yeah, and it's like that's the thing is you got to be careful with that. I can totally understand why like a woman would be uncomfortable. And then also just recently, I had a girl who wrote like a book about Kurt Cobain on, and it was like a really good interview. It went for like over 2 hours. I thought it went
Wow.
totally fine. Yeah.
Okay.
And then we even talked after, and then afterwards she was like, "Hey, is there any way that you could delete the podcast or not put it up because I'm getting like a bunch of hate for it?" And I guess like I don't know if it's just like Nirvana fans, Kurt Cobain fans, or whatever are like kind of coming after her for whatever reason. Like she's a very nice girl, woman, and she like wrote a nice book about Kurt Cobain, but people are coming after her
Just getting the wrong
online.
kind of attention, I guess.
Yeah, just because you have these hardcore fans. So I deleted it, and hopefully, I don't know. As I'm like talking about things right now, I'm like, there are certain things that I definitely. I mean, obviously, I didn't give enough information on it, but you just got to be careful on what you say or what you don't say. But yeah. So in terms of the workplace, too, real quick, if we can cover,
Yeah.
I think we mainly went over like kind of like that type of stuff last time. I don't know if there's anything extra you want to say about either one of these subjects that you're either writing a book about or writing about it on your website. But
Yeah, just if people are people know any literary agents or publishing houses that are interested in a good leadership book that has a unique story and a different approach, plus a lesson that I really don't think most books are covering, then they should definitely check it out. Because the thing is, more than anything, if you want to be a great leader, but you're not connecting with the workforce because you don't actually know what counts as listening and what doesn't, that's what my book is for. That, and it's also a really interesting look at the inside of the NSA and just how messed up that is. Which is to say, so a lot of people might think, oh yeah, the government could use some efficiency, but that's a very different thing. But it's very different between efficiency and chaos. And right now, I think we've got more chaos than anything else.
yeah, and is there anything else that you wanted to cover, or do you think we've pretty much covered everything now in
Yep.
terms of that stuff?
As far as that's concerned, yeah, that's pretty much it. Just that
Okay.
that people are going to be safe and not scared. Like I said, this is everything I was talking about today is about risk management. Just know that information is valuable and there's so much that you can do with it because you can't keep up with this stuff, right? It's too hard to always be thinking about what could they do with this information? How can I protect it? It's just so much better to not give information at all and not worry about it. It's a simple strategy for avoiding the problem entirely, right? So you can say, ah, fuck it, just give it out. But you can also say, F no, I'm not giving you anything. Because in most cases, you can withhold information and be just fine. Not always, it depends, but always find out. And don't give out information you don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely try not to overshare, and I
Exactly.
hopefully, I think that I overall don't. Like I, obviously never given my address or anything. Like I've never given anything too serious, but I should be more aware of that. And I know for some people, even like smaller podcasts, but are still kind of have fans or famous or whatever. I know that they definitely don't want to give out their information. And like you were saying, like if anything, you can like if that window is open and you can see like a street sign or something, somebody who knows might show up at
Yeah,
your house or whatever. So, and then
exactly.
in terms of the I guess with I asked about the LLMs. What LLMs do you? I mean, what do you think about the LLMs and like which would you say are maybe the best to use if you do use them? Because I know last time you were saying you wouldn't touch DeepSeek, which like
Not a
I would
chance,
say
man.
I was surprised that it was even on there. And then also, what do you think about TikTok? Do you think there is any Chinese kind of spying on apps like that, like Chinese apps?
100% yes.
Oh, you do? Okay.
100% yes. There's no question. If you're tangled up with China, you're definitely getting your data stolen. Man, that sounds bad. Okay, let me put it this way. The Chinese government knows the power of information and they've written it into their laws. You can't even do business in China unless you open up your computer networks and data transmission to them. You cannot have private communications in China by law if you want to do business there. I did some research on that recently for a project, but that's the way they work. They've put spy code in devices that they shipped out from the factory in the past. They send people to the US to go to schools and join companies for the purposes of espionage. It's a known threat. And the FBI has a whole page about this that explains this openly, that they are something you have to be concerned about, especially if you take devices. If you go to China, be careful because anything you own could be taken at any time or broken into or what have you. Uh, so yeah, it's an actual threat. I don't necessarily think that we should say ban TikTok, at least not unilaterally all at once, but I think it's a threat that needs to be addressed. I think encouraging people to go to a different platform, forcing them to sell off part of it or something, but increasing our reliance on an unfriendly foreign nation is not good for us, especially since they can and will use that information against us.
Like I was saying before, with like my like I know that in general it's probably not a good idea to use it like at all, but if I'm doing stuff like nature videos or whatever, like just like not even like really like my own. At this point, I'm honestly just doing like AI videos. So it's just kind of like really, I'm not really giving much of anything away. Like, do you think that they could use any of that against me? How would they use it
Well,
against me?
if you take the sum total of everything you have said, posted, or shown, is that something I can put together to learn more about you than you thought? And the answer is maybe, maybe not. But what happens if you start to gain some measure of success on that platform and then they start requiring things for you to keep that, like a photocopy of your ID, right? Well, now you have this vested interest and you might lose money. It would cost you money to quit this platform. You're basically hooked, for lack of a better word. Do I think they'll do that? No, not really, but they could. And when you're talking about a company who is not really subject to our laws and has known to collect and use information, it's a risk. And that's one of those other risk decisions you have to make. But from a national security standpoint, they're right to look at TikTok or other companies. Foreign land purchase, the amount of uh, Chinese owners of American land is concerning to me because it's kind of like we're selling off our nation one plot of land at a time. And it's not something I looked deeply into, so I don't want to, sound all conspiratorial or anything, but foreign land ownership is something we should be paying attention to, I will say, in general.
You mean like them coming over and buying a property and stuff?
Yeah, when we got to the Seattle area, we started out at a B&B, and one of the people who lived in that neighborhood I happened to chat with said that there was a Chinese company buying every property on the block for way over market value.
Yeah, that seems crazy to me too. Like I was just talking to like an accountant actually about this. Like that should just not be allowed. Like I don't think we should
Should be
allow.
looked at the very least, because that's the whole point. So this is TikTok, same idea, that it's not physical space, but it is virtual space. They are getting into our culture, our society, and our economy, and we're becoming dependent on them. And that dependency creates control and risk.
Yeah, then what do you think about like the company BlackRock? Aren't they? Isn't that kind of like what they do, or what is? Do you know much about BlackRock?
I don't actually know about BlackRock at all.
No. Okay. They're supposed. I don't know enough about them either. They're supposed to be some kind of weird company that's honestly, I don't know. I don't know enough about that. But in terms of the LLMs, what would you say to use?
So for code, I just use Copilot. It works fine and it's on my computer, or maybe it reports back to Microsoft, but I'm not doing any code that's secure or protected, right? Just some home projects for myself. And even if they had every line of code I'd ever written, I don't think it would be a risk. For for image generation, which I do, and for the people who really hate AI, okay, I'm sorry. I know that's a really trigger for everybody, but I do it offline using stable diffusion just to blend photos together or create stock photography that does not exist anywhere. Like I can't even buy it. What I'm looking for just isn't there. So I use it to create stock photography for making the points that I need to make in my presentations better. That's all. Um,
Yeah.
so I mean, I don't know how that would hurt artists. I know it's, stolen art, they say, but what I'm creating isn't.
Yeah. Well, how do you even use Stable Diffusion? I also use those image generators, and
Yeah, the
how do
key
you,
is when you
isn't
do the
Stable
ones
Diffusion that
online,
hard?
they have
What?
a record of everything you create, which, do you know that company? Are you doing anything that's in any way sensitive or that you wouldn't want people to know about? What you do with your computing time should be up to you and to you only. So if you're going to do stuff, I would recommend doing it offline. It's very similar to having the whole cameras versus the security company sort of situation. Same idea, right? So Stable Diffusion is just a program you download. Essentially, you download it, you run it, and then you write prompts, and it shows up with photos, just like anything else. It's maybe not as simple as going to a website and typing a prompt, okay, because you got to get it set up the first time, but it's free and it
Is it
runs
supposed to
locally.
be? Is it supposed to be better than like Midjourney or any of the other ones?
I wouldn't say that. The ones I've seen online are really good in some cases. For example, there's one, and I forget the name, but you can throw in a prompt or a photo and say, okay, that, but now add Godzilla to the background. Okay, but make him pink. So you can lead the prompts by say, I want this, but change this. So it's a change based LLM, which is pretty cool.
Which one is that one?
I, for the life of me, cannot remember what it was called.
Because yeah, I mean, I'm in a similar situation. Well, first of all, I think that the way things are going is pretty much AI, obviously, and it's like, I know. I mean, trust me, like when it first came out, I could see why people were against it. I'm kind of against it, but I've kind of succumbed to it just because, like you said, I'm not able to do like if I'm making a YouTube video or a TikTok or an Instagram, and there's an image that I need, and I don't own it. I can't use somebody else's. The easiest way to do it would just be to do an AI image because what else are you supposed to do?
Yeah,
Like
I've
you said,
literally spent hours looking for pictures and unable to find one. So it's not like I'm
yeah,
taking money away from, stock photo, whatever. I literally can't find this photo. It doesn't exist. So I have to create it to get
yeah,
this point across.
exactly. And so it works perfectly for that. And I don't know. I'm not necessarily like I kind of said I was against AI. I'm not really against AI. Um, I can see why people are. I think that it's definitely a cheat
Well, there are
code.
problems. There's no question. I'm just saying I am not with these other people who are militantly anti-AI because there are valid uses for AI. That's the
Yeah,
key. And the most important thing is that we can't stop AI. No matter what anybody does, it's not going to stop. We have to guide its development into more ethical ways and abandon the idea of trying to stop it because that's a fantasy. That won't happen.
yeah. But I mean, I've used like Midjourney. Google has one. I don't know if it's open to everybody, but I'm able to use it. And then like Bing Image Creator, which is Dolly, which is like OpenAI's is Dolly. And then now Grok has one, but I haven't used Stable Diffusion only because, like you said, you have to like download some sort of program. It's not as easy as the other ones where you just type it in. You actually
But
have
it
to
is
like
secure
it is secure though. Is it?
because it's on your computer. Plus, that solves the problem that a lot of the militants have about the power usage of AI and how it's destroying the environment. Well, that doesn't hold true when you're doing it on your own computer. It doesn't cost me anything extra compared to the video games I play all the time.
Oh, so you have to like literally do everything on your own computer, all the storage and
Well,
everything.
right. I mean, the image. So for Stable Diffusion to work, you have to download a model, and that model might be several gigabytes, for example, but like 6 gigabytes. It's not a lot for most people. And once that model is downloaded, you can write your prompts in for that model. So some models are better for things like stock photography, some are better for illustration, some are better for, say, anime or cartoons, if that's what you want. But it's not super complicated, but you do have to set it up and it's all running on your computer. So you have to have a computer that's at least reasonably powerful enough to run it, for example. And then there you go. But like I said, I've been able to create photos that I really, really needed to get this point across that didn't exist otherwise.
Yeah, and it's like, what else are you supposed to do besides literally like hand draw it yourself, which like you probably can't do. I know I couldn't do that. So
Okay, so fun fact, you could hand draw a thing, and if it's reasonably good, you can throw it into the AI and it will create a stock photo from that using it as a guide.
wow. So I mean that way at least it's like your own thing
Generally
rather than
speaking, yeah.
taking from something else. Yeah.
So
So yeah,
another thing that's easier to do is if you take a bunch of images and make sort of a collage, a gross collage, and throw that into Stable Diffusion, it'll create an alternative version that's one smooth photo.
yeah. Okay. So in terms of yeah, I mean like you said, I think that like AI is coming and like there's really probably no stopping it. So it's like you either like join up with it or not. But in
Well, I
terms of
wouldn't say that. Like I said, there's a third option. It's not join us or die. It's give up on fighting it completely and focus on guiding it ethically. That's the difference, and that's an important difference. As a specific example, I have a friend who is a photographer, and back in the early '90s, I told him the same thing. Digital photography is it. Traditional is over. If you want to make it in the world moving forward, you have to adopt digital and find a way to live with it.
yeah. And
And it definitely turned out to be true.
yeah, it's like you can't like live, you can't live in the past. And I mean it is honestly sad that like all I don't know, I've issue I see both sides, but it's like it is honestly sad that a lot of these I would imagine a lot of these image or photographers and video creators are I guess gonna go go to the wayside eventually.
Well, not if they adopt a new technology. You can still use photography skill with digital. You're just not using film anymore, which means your model for how you charge people has to change. But you still know what an f-stop and an aperture is. You still know about lighting and composition. Those things don't change. You lost nothing really. It's just stop, get off your hill about digital and how it destroys your current model of charging for negatives. That's got to stop. Sorry. I mean,
Well,
there's no way around that.
what I mean with AI, like eventually AI is going to get so good to where it's going to be able to automatically, make a picture of whatever you want. So I would imagine that with video AI video generation is going to just completely take over um, any type of normal photographer or videographer's work.
Possibly.
Maybe not completely, but like you're still going to need experts making certain scenes in movies. But um, I would imagine that eventually the AI will be just as good as you or I taking the photo or the video, right? I mean, it pretty much already is.
Somewhat. I think that what's going to happen is the artists need to understand that AI can be a tool to help them with their process so that they can generate more things and faster and spread their imagination. They're still in control. It's just more guided. And there are going to be a lot of people who can create great things. Their competition is going to be much higher. And that is a problem for a lot of starving artists. And I don't know that there's an answer to that. It may completely change the landscape of how viable and a career in art is. Uh, but that is not something that's negotiable. Here it comes and we can't stop it. So you got to find a way to live with it that works for you. And if you weren't in a position where your art was making much money before, you still may not be now. But I will tell you this, there will always be demand because no matter how much AI advances, there are still things I won't be able to create unless I'm really good with it or can go beyond it. And that's where the artists come in. And that's where they need to market themselves. That's what they need to focus on. This is what AI can't do, but this is what I can do. That kind of thing.
Yeah, and like obviously there's still I would imagine there's still going to be movies made by really good directors.
Yeah,
Not only
AI is not going to
not
make movies. I mean, it's just not
yeah,
going to happen.
I mean I think eventually it will. They'll at least eventually get to a point where like I think they are probably already using it to a certain, or they are already using it to a certain extent. It probably won't get to a point where it's completely AI. Like I still think that you'll need the actors,
You need directors, you need editors.
directors, and all that. But like it's getting to a point where they're using it more and more, which I'm fine with. One justification I have with using AI, and like legitimately, I have this justification. You might disagree with it, but is if I'm like some low level YouTuber and I'm not making, I make barely making any money, maybe not making any money at all, but I want to create something on YouTube.
Right.
Before, it was really hard to do that because if I wasn't like literally able to go out and photograph or take videos of whatever I wanted to do, and I couldn't use yours. Let's just say like you're a really good photographer, videographer. You have all the good equipment. You're able to travel and explore and get all these different things. And I'm just some poor guy who isn't able to do that. I don't have the money. I'm not able to travel. Well, now at least I can use AI to make stuff,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Oh,
I kind of feel,
I
I
agree
kind
with
of,
you personally. I think that's a good thing in some
yeah,
ways
that's
because
what I'm saying.
it sets free people's imagination who don't have the time, the skills, or the money to otherwise get that out. And I think that that's a good thing because it's a
Yeah,
tragedy that some of the stories, some of the ideas, some of the videos, some of the things that people want to create, they just can't. And
yeah.
if AI helps fix that, then I think that's a positive. We just need to find a way to do that ethically. For example, if they can come up with AI models that work entirely off of public domain imagery, for example, then where would the argument be then?
I don't even really know if I have a problem with the AI models taking from humans because humans essentially kind of take from humans. Like without you
Well,
even realizing it, like you're pretty much being influenced by other humans. And I know you can make an argument that like AIs aren't humans and they're
no, I wouldn't say
computers.
that, but I do understand where the artists are coming from. I am an artist in it to a degree, and the people who can do the amazing things that I see, they have their very specific style and quality that they do that's unique to them, and having that taken from them, yeah, that's pretty shitty. Uh, so I think that there are definitely limits, but I see advantages and disadvantages, and the most important thing, like I said, is just we guide the technology. We don't fight it because we can't fight it at all. There's zero chance of AI going away.
Yeah, but it's like I see what you're saying, but it's like I mean I kind of guess it to a certain extent depends on it's kind of like a weird argument, but it's like it kind of depends on how much money the original artist is making. Like let's just take let's just take like an obvious example, like Foo Fighters or something. Let's just say like there's some AI music generator that is like kind of borrowing from what Foo Fighters are doing or Nirvana or whoever. Or you could say Quentin Tarantino. That's kind of like weird because Quentin Tarantino is like it's like a whole I don't know, but let's just say Foo Fighters, Nirvana, whoever, Blink 182, like this music generator, this AI music generator is taking from these different bands, Metallica. Well, these bands are like multi millionaires. Like I really don't give a shit if like anybody takes anything from these bands, and I really mean that. Like but at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily want to take from like a starving artist. Like if you're a
Yeah,
starving artist,
I, I I get where you're coming from. I won't say I agree completely, but I understand. I will say this: consider if you're Metallica and somebody makes a song in your style through AI that people think you made, but
I
completely doesn't represent you or your beliefs or anything else. That is a problem.
I think there's a problem. I think the line should be drawn at when you're trying to steal, like you're literally trying to say this is mine, but it's
Yes,
Metallica or whatever.
that's an example of where being rich does not save you. If, for instance, some horrible politician that you hate uses your songs as their anthem and you hate their guts, that's a violation of yourself, not related to your wealth or your position or anything else. That's just vile. It's a violation.
But I think that like what they're doing is I don't think that they're making. I think that they're trying not to make programs that replicate what other bands or whoever, bands, writers,
Well,
photographers.
I mean, just a matter of time, right? And as far as the artists are concerned, it's really easy to say, make art of this in the style of this artist by name, and it does it.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, as long as you're not trying to literally say this is Metallica. Like if I make some sort of AI song, or I guess song's kind of the easiest to do. As long as I'm not saying this is literally a Metallica song, I think it should be all right. Like this is maybe a song that was influenced by Metallica, but not literally.
I
It's
mean,
not a
sure,
Metallica song. Yeah.
assuming that it didn't go viral and people just got the wrong idea and it came out of your control, because Metallica still has to deal with your creation, even if you didn't intend it to end up that way. So there's a reason that the artists are concerned. And I think those
No,
those concerns are valid.
I understand why they're concerned, and I understand why their concerns are valid, but I don't care about Metallica at
That's
all.
fair enough.
Like you know what I
Another
mean?
good
Like it's
example.
like I do care about a band that's barely scraping,
Sure.
barely getting by, whose Spotify is paying them
Well, even
like
if you
nothing,
were to
but I
go
don't care
big,
about Metallica.
if your podcast were to go huge and somebody made a knockoff video mocking you that looked like you, whether or not they claimed it was actually you or not, if they said this is a parody on the original, but then it got reshared without that notice, you know, bad stuff.
I kind of think that should be allowed. The main thing that I would say that shouldn't be allowed is somebody shouldn't be able to literally say that they are me. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Regardless, I mean, it sounds like we agree that there are definitely cases where this is a problem and those need to be managed, which is all I'm really saying.
Yeah. And this has already gone on longer than we expected. So last sorry about that. We went off on that
No
tangent,
worries.
which I'm interested in AI, so that's why.
I mean, yeah, it is very
Yeah.
interesting for sure.
Yeah. So in terms of the future of surveillance, people being able to, watch your every move. I don't know if you've heard of this thing called like the Internet of Things.
Yes.
You have heard of that. So
Yes. There was
my
a
dad,
casino who got hacked because of a thermometer in their fish tank.
wow. So how did that work?
Internet of Things. All of the things in the casino are connected to their network. And if they don't do it properly, the security of every device is the security of your whole system. So no matter how careful you were with all the work computers, the moment somebody drops a thermometer in that doesn't have good security, the whole network is compromised.
So looking to the future, I don't know how long it'll be before it'll literally be kind of like a surveillance state where they'll have like video cameras everywhere. But
Uh,
how do you think that it's going to play out? And do you think it's good or bad? Like,
the most important thing is visibility. We need to have very, very clear visibility into what is happening and why, and to what degree, and that there's oversight. And that oversight depends almost 100% on whistleblowing, which is why the most important thing we need to do for the future to protect ourselves is to make sure that we are empowering whistleblowers to the greatest degree possible. Because if not, you don't have the time, I don't have the time to pay attention to all the bad things that could happen or what's going on. Our attention span becomes the weapon of the abusers, of the oppressors. The only way to defend us is to empower the people at work who are the insiders to speak up and go public whenever they see the problem. We need to normalize that and we need to protect it. And until that happens, we're at risk. And that risk will only increase over time.
yeah. So if you think it gets to a point where there is kind of a surveillance state, and it's like the government's like, oh, look, like we can capture all criminals because we know I mean, we're all, like I said, we're
Yeah, that's
almost
always the
kind of,
excuse, right?
yeah.
Oh yeah, we caught all the bad guys because we're watching everything.
Yeah, like so do you think that's fine as long as you still have the people who are whistleblowing, the people who are kind of coming out and making sure that they're using it for the correct purposes, right?
No, I think that there needs to be very strict limits and regulation as well. There are certain things that just should not be captured, that should not be subject to investigation or review. For example, we have the right to be forgotten. If we said or did something really stupid and embarrassing and that doesn't represent us anymore, a long, long time ago, I would prefer that it just be forgotten if it's not typical of me. I don't want to have to answer for it. And I think that people have the right to be forgotten until and unless they do something that makes that relevant again, right? So if I'm recording everything all the time, you can never escape from any of your mistakes. You can never escape from any of your misunderstandings. You may not have said the N word. You said a word that sounds like it, but for the rest of your life, that's you. And I'm not okay with that.
Do you think we'll ever get to a point with AI or technology or whatever where we have some sort of system in place that um, protects us not only yeah, like basically protects us from the government, but then also like basically some sort of system set up to where the government can't abuse their power. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
No, I think the only thing that protects us from the government is the limitations that we set on them and then the safeguards we put in place to enforce those limitations.
Okay. So, all right. So, lastly, we can wrap up. I asked you last time what your favorite stuff is. So, I guess just the main thing is your book is out, right?
No, no, I'm still trying to get it published.
Okay. So, is that like is that going to be hard to do, or will it happen soon?
Yeah, it's I'm shopping around for agents. I'm trying to go on podcasts and drum up some attention for it. But yeah, I want people to know that the book is out there. But unless I can find a publisher or an agent, it's probably going to sit there. I might consider self-publishing, but we'll see what happens. But for now, you can check it out on my website at thegeekprofessor.com.
And you can read the whole thing there.
No, but if you sign up on the mailing list for updates on the book's publishing, you get a free copy of my mini book, which is only 40 pages long, that talks about my work at the agency and what it was like and Snowden and just thoughts about the NSA itself outside of the scope of leadership or workplace relations.
Okay. Yeah, I'm actually talking. Funny enough, I'm talking to a book publisher on Tuesday. So if you want,
Let me know.
I'll bring you up because he is the same guy who's publishing that Kurt Cobain book. She like referred him to me. So I
Yeah,
don't know. He
I'm
seems
interested in any leads.
yeah, he seems like a pretty nice, pretty friendly guy. So I'll let him know that you have this book and
I appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah. And then are you giving any other speeches or anything like that? I know
I have three speeches that I've created from the book that I plan to start shopping around, possibly to go to TED or other conferences to see if I can, one, drum up interest in the book and also teach people the things that I want to teach them. For example, I don't remember if I said one of the briefings that I do is called The NSA's Greatest Adversary, Parking. And the whole concept is how the leaders at the NSA just shit on people for saying the parking is bad all the time because they put zero effort into learning why people cared so much. Because there really were some severe problems with the parking that were hurting people, putting them at medical risk or, all kinds of problems. And they paid no attention to it because they had reserved parking spaces and didn't care, essentially. And that lesson of empathy is important not just for leaders but anyone. So that's one that I'm really looking forward to doing if I can find the right venue.
yeah, cool. All right. Well, thanks again for coming on.
Of
Thanks for
course.
listening, guys. Uh, bye.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.